it's a rescue on the roof of the world.
How'd you end up that way? I mean, how'd you end up drafted?
Yeah, we drafted. They said we were volunteers, but they were lying. They drafted us. Millen, my dad always got on him for volunteering.
Yeah, because you know why? Because on the draft notice, on your notice that you were accepted, you know, as an enlisted man. And as an enlisted man meant that you went in as a private, you know. And they called them enlisted men. If you were not an officer, you were an enlisted man. And Dad always thought I had enlisted, because that's what it said on the notice, you know, you're accepted as an enlisted.
And they congratulate you too.
Yeah, congratulate
Several
you,
a
yeah.
lot of these. Or we could take it out of there.
He went
I mean,
right
that
after
would help you.
high school.
Just a spoon, take it.
Yeah. Actually, we were
Here, I'll
sworn
take
in
it, I
about 10 days before. We got a 10-day
Want me
furlough.
to put
We
this
were
on?
sworn in and we got a 10-day furlough.
Don't anybody,
To
just
graduate and
what
go
you
through the
want
ceremony,
to
you
do.
know, graduation ceremony. And we were the first first 18-year-old draftees.
First start 21, you had to be 21 before they
Yeah, right,
started.
yeah, I was the first group.
So what year did you go?
43,
43.
yeah. June, let's see.
Okay.
Our wedding is 8th, isn't it, of June? Okay, the 6th of June. I know it's 2 days before I got married. And then of course I got married 2 years afterwards, but the date was confusing to me.
I mean, here you went. Where'd you have basic? That was Army Air Corps back then.
It was Army Air Corps, right. And we had the same basic as infantry, that we were in the same basic. I took my basic training in Amarillo, Texas. And we had, I would say maybe 75% of them went in the infantry and the other 25% of whatever was went into the Air Force.
How'd you end up in Air Corps then?
They just drew straws. You had to go through a physical to begin with. You had to be able to pass night vision, what they call night vision test, and you had to be able to distinguish. You couldn't have any color blindness. Had to required some physical requirements, you know. But other than that, if you made all that, passed all the physicals, then they drew lots. Whether which way you went, so I didn't know whether I was
You
going
want
to
me
be
to do
3 years
something?
or whatever. And they just drew up.
Well, when I got in, I was on the last end there, you know, and they went to work and they pile your, what do you call it, records up, and they just, every third one of the day you got.
When you gotta look that around.
Yeah, they did that. They did that when I was in Fort Dodge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they had all the records piled up, and then everyone, and this one is the 2 Army guys, and
That was in when we went to Fort Dodge. We had every third one.
Yeah.
We did the same thing, and then after we got to Amarillo, I took my basic with the infantry and the Air Corps were the same.
My dad
Miss you
was World War I, of course.
Yeah.
But he said, never volunteer.
Right, and I did.
I did once.
Yeah.
Biggest blundering mistake ever. That's how I got in the infantry.
Well, see, I didn't volunteer either for anything because what Dad had told me, and I didn't volunteer, and that's just the way they picked it, and I left it that
I
way.
had medical training. I didn't have infantry training. We graduated as surgical technician, so then they shipped us back to the outfit I came from. It was only about 8 or 9 months in the whole company, I guess it was in school. And so they needed somebody as a chemical warfare officer. And they said, you qualify because you have the medics taught us how to treat, chemical warfare victims. And gosh, I got in there, and every day I run a bunch of them through smoke, that with the gas mask, and then walk through without the gas mask. But it was cut down, in various potent. Did that every day for I don't know how many months. Then we shipped out, and we went into Camp Kilmer. We sailed from. We got into England, and then they had already, some of them had already crossed the channel. We were in.
Do you have cats or dogs?
But the problem was the intelligence decided that it wasn't going to use chemical or at all chemical. And so then I automatically just to give me a rifle and here you go. You're here. We're not going to send you back. No way.
Yeah, we had a brown, or even that, we had to take it home.
And then the first day, first night we stood out in the rank with all the shoes were too big, you know, they give you 2 buckets of sand and then they fit your shoes. And so anyway, they said they wanted 6 volunteers and that could type. So these fellows jumped on it, you know, oh, here we go. If I just had a little more education and knew how to type, I'd get a soft job. We no more got back to barracks, here comes these fellows all in with buckets and mops. Tricky, oh, they were full of tricks. You know, some half-time corporal in charge. Big head, you got the big head, but it's the corporal.
Yeah.
Then you went from England to where?
Yeah, into France, passed on, then we were in the Belgian boat. Before I got my terrible feet, the foot doctor said, oh, that's what the problem was. Your blood vessels kind of rupture, you know, and when you heal up, it's never the same. So I have terrible feet. At least we can't walk on them. Yeah, there were 5 of us. Weren't there 5 of us in the service?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we're on the deck, and the 3 of us. We were almost in every branch too. You were in the Air Force, I was in the infantry, and your dad was in the Navy.
I got in the Seabees. I was for the Navy, and then they drafted out of that again, so I got in the Seabees. So, good deal. Cut hair.
Poor Jack.
Your most vivid memory?
Pardon?
Your most vivid memory?
Well, battles, the real battles, pretty bad. After they cleared the skies clear, we couldn't run the Air Force couldn't help us at all, and we were just victims of weather. Their winter was the worst winter they'd ever had. They said, and I believe it. There was snow 3 feet deep.
Yeah.
And you couldn't dig a foxhole in the first place, and you found some they had abandoned, you know. But the shell had hit, you know, the shell had penetrates a little ways before it explodes, artillery. But these didn't, they just clink, you know, on top of them. Terrible, deadly. Well, out of the 40 men, there were 9 of us come out of that. And so then I became a platoon sergeant. Medical training, I'm platoon sergeant. Kind of the process of elimination, you know. I was already a staff sergeant from being in the medic. So, we had our first sergeant was Sergeant Flint, John Flint. And he was just like a grandpa to me. He took a liking to me. I don't know how, why, but I liked the old guy. And he was wanted in there real bad because he wanted to get that pay to retire on, combat pay. But that morning I reported, it was on a Saturday morning, and he kicking something under the desk, and he told me what he had jobs lined up for me. He was going to send me on to school at Fort Manning Chemical Warfare School, and a little more schooling. And while he's sitting there, he says, "Do you drink?" I said, "Oh yeah, a little bit, you know." He says, "Have you been drinking all your life?" And I said, "Well, I don't know." I says, "When I was baptized, my mom gave me a tablespoonful of wine, and I never whimpered at all. Went all the way to church and back." So that was my first experience. And then he pours, he has 2 glasses, not as big as that. Pours about, Arnie Werner says, 2 finger drink, you know. And so he poured himself on them, and I had never, almost hardly ever drank whiskey, but couldn't afford it, and I didn't drink it anyway. And so, okay, he said, you first, and I thought, now what am I gonna do? I know that I'm gonna choke on it maybe, I hope not. So I thought, well, I've seen John Wayne movies, and they just tip them up, it's shoot. So that's what I did. And this old friend said, you're my kind of fella, you're my kind of guy. And he lived on the stuff. Yeah, actually, the amazing thing is that I was only in there a little less than 3 years. You could write a book on it. No kidding. So many things took place in such a short time. Man. And when they first got the D-Day over there, why, it looked like we were going to be fighting forever, and then they dropped those bombs on Hiroshima, and it was all over, but we were destined to go there. We were going to be the first one in. Yeah, I remember that, and I remember vividly when they did that. But I was home on what they call a 30-day furlough, the recuperation furlough, to get you all lined up for the battle into Japan. And we had no old radio, and I listened to the news, and they talking about that bomb they dropped, and I didn't know what kind of a bomb it was. It must have been a super bomb of some kind. And another few days, they dropped 2 or 3 more, and that was it, they just
What day was that? When they did that?
When they dropped them? Well, I don't remember the dates, but I remember one thing when the war was over, over in Europe, when the war was over, why, we were, right after we got the news, it was a late afternoon when we got the news, and we started celebrating. Well, because, they had some whiskey, I don't know where they got it, I guess out of the dispensary or whatever, so the officers.
Oh, yeah.
The officers had it. So we had 4 officers on our crew, and they had access, to whiskey. So they brought the whiskey over, and everybody was celebrating like mad. I can remember we were just shooting up flare guns and everything else, and really like 4th of July. And the officer of the day and an MP came around, and when we saw him coming, well, we just stopped doing everything and got back in the tent, act like we were playing cards and minding our own business. When the officer of the day came around, and he said, were you guys shooting up flare guns? Nobody answered. They looked at each other. They said, well, if you weren't, you better get out there and do it. The war is over. So they really got into the act. Everybody was really, really.
And everybody was looking forward to getting home. They were so anxious, and there's a lot of things that we should have done, we didn't. Should have had a lot of stuff on our records.
The thing is, when you were over there, you figure you'd never see land again back here. You never.
I didn't figure we
No,
ever.
we didn't figure. We were so busy. Just about every day we flew. Just about every day, and you put in long hours. You got up like 4 o'clock in the morning, and you went in through briefing. You loaded up the planes with. We did our own ammunition, loaded up our own ammunition. We had a crew that loaded up the bombs, but they would just tie them up, and then we would have to. They would put the bombs in the rack, and then we would have to wire them. And we had one guy that was trained for that on the crew, and then the rest of us helped wire them up, wire the bombs. And I guess maybe about 6, just about daylight, when we get ready to take off. We'd take off, and we wouldn't come back until maybe around 5 o'clock in the afternoon when we'd get back off of our flight. Then we'd have to go through briefing again, or interrogation, and they would take the cameras that were loaded and take the film and so forth, produce them, and what we had seen. They asked you questions on what you had seen and what kind of action you had encountered, and get all the information on how successful the mission was. And also, you would find out who made it and who didn't. You know, they have a count and of what happened and how many people came out, if you seen any parachutes and this kind of stuff. And after that, you would have go to the dispensary, and you have an 8-ounce glass of rock and rye whiskey. You'd have to drink that rock and rye whiskey before you could go to chow. And that was a must, whether you were a drinking man or not.
What was the theory behind that?
Nerves,
Relax,
more
more
nerves,
relax, yeah.
more nerves, relax, yeah. Because then you would go through the chow line and everybody was just hiring a kite, you know. And, you know, on a raw stomach, you know, you had to eat for 12 hours. And you'd go through the chow line, and after chow, I tell you, you'd get back to your tent, you'd go right to sleep. 4 o'clock the next morning, you'd rock you up again, same thing. It was across the day after day. It didn't make any difference whether it was Christmas, Thanksgiving, or what. No, you went Sundays, one day was like another. And it was day after day, day after day. And we were only required to 35 sorties, they called them sorties. Before that, they were 50 missions. You qualified for return after 50 missions. When they went to the sortie program, you had to have proof that you had successfully dropped your bombs and, you know, on the target. You had probably 3 targets you could go to. If one of them didn't work out, you go to another, depending on the weather conditions, you know. And if you did not successfully drop your bombs, you didn't get credit for the mission. So you could fly 70 missions and still not get 35 sorties.
In the African campaign, they bombed the sheep. Some olive grove, and every sheep, and they bombed the sheep. If they did accidentally or whatever, they had to pay for the sheep, but the Arabs that herded them, they were free. That's what.
That was the story anyway, yeah.
Well, that's what they said. I don't know. I wasn't in the Air Force. Yeah, I met Patton, General Patton. We were running patrols during the bowls. We were running behind the enemy line, and they had these Kraut tanks. They were in a big building. And they pull them in there in the daytime and then back them out at night, and that's when they fire on us, you know. So there was, I don't know, I forget a little bit about 8 of them, and I just had French speaking fellows and German and Italian, so we could, you know, understand or communicate with them. And anyhow, First Sergeant Smith again called me in the street command post out in the timber somewhere, and he said, "Yeah, Patton wants to meet with some fellows that has been across, and they want to know wow, they're hiding those tanks." And so he says, "Patton's going to be here, George C." Call him George C. Jr. Not to his face. So anyway, I went back, and the guy said, "Oh man, you better shave up and put on some clean clothes." I said, "Hell, I have no clean clothes to put on." And hell, if you don't like what I'm doing, you can just court-martial me and send me back. And there was no danger of that. So anyway, the old fellow, you know, I came like, they had us all blankets in front of the door and stuff, you know, or keep him, so they wouldn't spot him in the lights or whatever. And so when I got to before the first blanket that was hanging up, why they said, "You've got to leave your piece, your rifle with us." I said, "Oh no, I won't do that." Yeah, but you got it. No, you don't got it. The book says you never part with your rifle. And old Patton heard it. Yeah, it was so funny. "Geez, that soldier in," he says, "Gee, my gosh, you got something."
Harlan Borman.
I guess my first experience in the service was when I was in basic training, and we were on guard duty, and the officer or the sergeant of the guard had switched posts. You had a post number, you had to know your post number, and he had switched posts and failed to give us the number, my new number. And here I am in there. I'm in the orderly room where they store all the ammunition and the guns. So I'm inside, and here I hear the chief coming in. It's the office of the day and the MP. They checked on the guards, and of course the first thing they do, it just hit me. Oh, what is my post number? Because the first thing they ask you what your post number is, and I didn't know what my post number was. So I opened up the doors. You know, they had a bar across, and it's a couple of swinging doors, and all your guns and ammunition is inside. And the officer of the day asked me what my post number was, and I told him I didn't know. That the sergeant of the guard had not given me my post number. So he tells the MP to take my gun away from me, and we were instructed never to give up your gun. So I backed up just one step, and I said, "Don't you dare." And he says, "Take that soldier's gun." So he stepped up one more time, and he reached for my gun, and I just took the gun, and I just took the button, and I hit him right over the head. He had a helmet on, of course, helmet liner, and he just went down like a rag. And the officer of the day called then for help, you know, and they hauled the guy away in an ambulance, and I never heard any more about it until the next day I was called in the orderly room. And I thought, oh, I'm really in trouble now. And they really gave me a commendation for what I had done, that I had stuck to my guns, you know, and not given up my gun.
Yeah, sometimes the biggest blundering mistake and you got credit for it.
Yeah, right. And I never expected that. I thought, oh man, I'm in trouble now. Oh, I was scared. I didn't sleep that night. Figured I was in real trouble. Because that was my first bad experience, and I hadn't been in the service for a month even, you know. Very short time, maybe a couple of weeks is all, and that was in basic training. I never did see that MP again. I didn't ever want to, really. I don't know what happened to him, really. They probably shipped him off to their...
Light concussion.
Yeah.
He didn't remember.
Medical discharge.
Yeah, probably did.
Well, they had a section 8, or a section 8.
Yeah, that was...
That's when you lose your marbles.
Oh, yeah, right.
Oh, section 8. It was a discharge without honor.
Right,
Well, not a dishonorable discharge, but it was a discharge without honor.
Yeah.
It was a difference.
We had a guy from northern part of Iowa. He was a minister's son that got a section 8. And he just flipped. He really did. And everybody in the barracks thought, well, maybe this is intentional and so forth.
Yeah,
You never know.
so many
To get out.
So many people he was associated with. Some you remember and some you don't.
I can remember he was a blonde Swede from Eldon, Iowa. And that's all I remember about him, but he was a real quiet type of guy. You know. Didn't say much at all. Real quiet, but I guess it just got too much for him, I guess. But you could tell there was something wrong that he just went off in deep end.
Ernie Dickinson, he was from Waterloo, and he was a Bible reader, we called him. He'd sit on the edge of the bunk, the top bunk, and he'd read the Bible so everybody could see it. And somebody was cussing him, swearing, and he jumped off the thing and went over and showed him in the Bible, gave him some Bible readings. Back, wait a minute here. And so anyway, he didn't smoke, he wouldn't drink, wouldn't play cards. So I went off to school and I came back, and who was up there playing poker in the can, back in the can with Ernie Dickinson. smoking cigarettes, playing poker. Oh, man. Poor guy.
But when we were in basic training, they had a cloudburst there, and that was like, oh, it just rained like crazy. And you know, that's out in the desert, Amarillo, Texas. And it's a desert area, and it just poured rain. And it rained so hard, and I don't know how much it was, but it formed a lake. Right up, we were right at the end of the post, you know, and beyond that was field, and then you'd have to go maybe a couple of blocks down to the hospital, the base hospital. And that whole area that we had been training in was underwater. There was a great big lake, and it stayed there for a long time, as long as I was there. And we had a plague of frogs. Frogs got, oh man, frogs every place. You had to watch when you walked because you'd slip. They were all over the place. Cars would run off the road because there were that many frogs. A blacktop road, and there was a laundry. Base laundry was right across the street on the other direction. These civilians would come in, you know, work there at the laundry, base laundry. And many of them tried to make the corner, and they'd slide off. There's that many frogs. We would take a shovel, a scoop shovel, and shovel them out of the latrine, because every time you opened the door, a whole bunch of them would jump in. They were that thick, it was unbelievable. And by about noon, it was thick. Oh, you know, they would start smelling all the dead frogs, and then they'd dry up. By mid-afternoon, they'd all be dried up again, because it was hot, hotter than Pickens there. Because this was like in July and August.
The mission you'll never forget?
The mission I will never forget. Yeah, that's the one we got shot down. Yeah, that's the one we got shot down. I was not with my original crew. I was flying as lead operator on that crew, and we got shot up real bad. We didn't have enough altitude to bail out. We had attempted to bail out, but then the pilot decided that we just were too low. We couldn't take a chance. And also we were right over, we were pretty close to the target, and you know, it was not a good place to bail out anyway. So we rode it out all the way, and we landed in an olive orchard. And it just happened to be just an area flat enough that we could make a crash landing. But we didn't get very far. We didn't any more than get out of there. All 10 of us survived it. I hurt my knee, my left knee, in the crash, and that bothered me for a long time. But other than that, we all came out of that pretty much unscathed. And the plane was pretty well broken up, because when we came through, there was a path through the center, and both wings were torn off the plane. But the guerrillas captured us. We didn't get very far, and the guerrillas captured us. And the guerrillas were the Chetniks. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Chetniks in Yugoslavia. And we had gotten that far, and they captured us. And actually, they threatened to kill us and take all of our belongings. But I was the only one in the group that could speak German, and most of those people that over there can understand German. And the leader of the group could speak German pretty well, because he was a judge or a lawyer, you know, in civilian life before that, and he was pretty well polished. So I negotiated with them. If they let us go, if they turned us over to the Italians or American forces, that I would get in contact with them, because I was radio operator, and I'd try to get in contact with them, and actually we paid them a ransom, and it worked. So we managed to get out of. They helped me ransom. They let the other guys go, because they didn't have the money yet. They helped me ransom then, and I was there for 3 days longer than the rest of them were, until the money came. When the money came in, they turned me over to the Italians. And the Italians were working between the Chetniks and and the U.S. Air Force. So what they paid for us, I don't know. We had $40 a piece on us, every one of us, and that got us to the first stage. That got us up. We gave them that, and we turned it over to, of course, a lot of those guys, they didn't know $1 from another, you know.
Right.
But the leader did. He didn't know. He knew what money, and $40 was a lot of money to them. And between the 10 of us, that's $400. And that carried them a long way as far as food, you know, because those guys were actually they were a mercenary army. They hired out to anybody that gave them any money. But they told us to begin with in briefing, try to stay away from the guerrillas. But how can you? You know, you don't know who the guerrillas are and who aren't. You don't know where they're at because they come out of nowhere. And I would guess there was probably, just roughly speaking, between 30 and 40 of them in that group. So we didn't have a chance to fight our way out. We didn't have, first of all we had a 45 pistol and a knife. And that wouldn't carry it, you know. These people were loaded. They had women, men and women in a group. And they had grenades. They had grenades hanging all over them, you know, hand grenades. And they all carried guns and so forth. So we were captive. Actually, we were, there's two women that really brought us back. There's two women, they were rough-looking cookies. Oh, man, they were tough-looking. And they brought us back most of the way and turned us over to another group. And from there on, we got back to the seaport. And the first group was picked up, then except myself, was picked up by a fishing boat, Italian fishing boat. And I was there for another 3 days, captive, and then they turned me loose, but we got the money. It took us 13 days to get back from the time we got shot down.
It was anti-aircraft fire, or?
Yeah, right, yeah. One mission I was supposed to go on, and I don't remember just how many missions I had in. I probably had it in about 20 sorties by that time. And the crew that I went over with was designated to go to Olive Creek for R&R. And I had a lot more missions than they did because I was flying lead operator. And my pilot managed to get me on that in with their group to Olive Creek. And about half an hour before we took off, they pulled me off of that flight and replaced me with another operator. And that's the one mission where they didn't make it back. They got blown up. The ship blew up. And so I was real fortunate. And the co-pilot, which was the base commander, managed to get out of that alive, but the rest of them didn't. And the plane, when the plane blew up, the front part of the fuselage, including the wings, were intact. And he was knocked unconscious, and the pilot was killed. He was knocked unconscious. When he came through, he was floating through the air. A fire, back end of the wings were on fire. And, but the windshields were knocked out. I guess when the explosion knocked out the windshields. He crawled out of the windshield. He had to take his parachute off. Like I said before, you didn't have room to move with the parachute on. They had a chest chute. So he took his parachute out and crawled through the windshield and put his parachute on and was able to bail out away from the target. The rest of them, the people that saw him bail out, they had some of them that did bail out, and they were shot on the way down. they said that they saw them shoot, you know, they could tell they were being shot all the way down, and they didn't make it, none of them made it. But this guy was taken prisoner then, and he told the whole story. And it was one of my lucky days, I guess. Somebody was looking out for me. That was when President Roosevelt's funeral was. When I was on Olive Creek when they had a ceremony for his funeral.
And the guy that you called Deacon,
Oh yeah,
he
Deacon.
made it through the war.
Yeah, he was with a different crew. He was with Captain Flemighetti's crew. It was they flew the ship called Life, and that was the only ship that made it all the way through the war. The rest of them, you know, got shot up and had to be replaced and so forth. But that was the only plane that made it all the way through the war. It was pretty well shot up, but it made it all the way through, and it really something, quite a story behind that, because first of all, they called it Life, and it happened to be Life. But they were a good crew. But he was a nose gunner. Deacon was they called him Deacon. I can't remember what his real name was. But he would always get on the intercom, you know, and we'd get into formation, you know, and then he would always have a prayer. Which was kind of emotional, you know. Our crew, our pilot had a hymn that we always sang. Let's see, da 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 da. I can't remember the number of the hymn. I knew the words real good, but but that was his favorite hymn when we got up, after we got up airborne. And before we got in formation, we'd get on the intercom and we'd always sing that hymn. But we were all teenagers except one. Our top turret gunner, was married, and he was in his middle 20s, and everybody called him Grandpa. He was from Minneapolis, and we never heard from him since. We tried to locate him and never were able to locate him afterwards. Of course, see, our crew was split up then before we came back to the States, and we reorganized. Part of the crew was shipped back. All the enlisted men were shipped back except the engineer and myself. The engineer and myself stayed with the officers. And then we got 4 new enlisted men. The 4 new enlisted men were guys that had gotten shot down too and escaped. And they joined us then. And they were not of the same group that I escaped with. They were a different group. And I guess they had lost some of their crew members, you know, that